Masechet Avodah Zarah Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, 20 lines down. So the last thing we mentioned was Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yeshua, sorry, was talking to the Rabbi Ishmael, and he got shut down by saying a pasuk like, "Don't ask questions on the Gezerah." Gemara says, "Okay, we still don't know why there's a Gezerah for the cheese. My Gezerah, what's the reason for the decree?" Rabbi Shimon Pazi, Rabbi Shimon Ben Levi Mishum Nikol were worried about snake may have taken the milk, and that might cause problems for the actual cheese. It made if it was left uncovered. The Gemara says, "V'lema la mishum nikor." So just tell him it's because of the snake. The Gemara says, "Kedula like ula, tamar ula ki gazru gazeret ben whenever they made a new takana in Israel, every time they made a new decree, lo megalu atama atasi arashta, they would not tell the reason for the decree for 12 months. Didn't know why. The Ika Inish tells really because maybe there'll be a person who doesn't understand it or think that it's a good decree. But Zuben, he'll disgrace it, he'll treat it lightly, and it'll ruin it for everybody. Therefore, when Hamim used to make it to the decree, 12 months, you wouldn't know why. Until everybody got used to it. Now, Megadeth but Meir didn't like this. He said, one second. If that's the reason why we don't have cheese, is because of snakes. That's the case. Old cheese or aged cheese or dried cheese should be mutar. We know this before. Yavesh mutar, emin halavesh. Yashan mutar, emin halaveshin. Because something is dried out or aged, it wasn't touched by venom. That should be our automatic way. The Gemara says no. To be hidden on the fish. Because technically the cheese can have traces of milk that when it's curdled, there might be some pieces of cheese that it still has some milk on it, and that part could have the snake venom that did not age. Okay, which is a different reason. If or because they are it's asur because they curdled it in the stomach lining of the belly of the Nivela. The Gemara says, kivat gufa shari, 1 second, but the thing itself is mutar. Mir Shmuel, Achi, but Shmuel didn't say that. The Hatan Mishnah said, kivat ha'avat gufa, they made a decree. Sounds like it's mutar otherwise. So then we say, 1 second. Um, the Mishnah says, kivat ha'avat having the belly of the animal slaughtered by a goy, Vishan Nivela or Nivela, Harizu Asura, the Asur, but meanwhile, we asked, 1 second, after the Vadish Chavim Lav Nivela, what mean? You've made it sound like two different things. The goy's animal that it slaughtered, or a nevela. Every single animal that goy slaughtered is a nevela because it's a non-kosher shahita, non-kosher slaughtering. So why mention the two separate halachot? The Gemara says the Mashmul says Halak it's teaching you one halakha to teach you as follows: Kevat shahitat ovet kochavim nevela asur. The belly of an animal slaughtered by a goy, which is a nevela, is asur. So you see from here that Shmuel says that it's asur to have a nevela, seemingly going against what he said now, that seemingly it's mutar. The Gemara says, "Like Hashem, no, Sira, no question, don't worry. Kan kodem hazara, kan ahad hazara, u'mishnah b'zazamim mekora." The Mishnah in Hulin mentioned Rabbi Yeshua's halacha that it's mutar, seemingly mutar, before he retracted it. In our Mishnah over here, he already retracted. Oh, how come we don't fix the Mishnah? Because we see right here, we don't change the Mishnah. The way it was written, even though he retracted later, we don't change it. Rav Malkiah Mishmei Rav Ada bar Ava Ma'amar, right? We mentioned before, Malkiah or Malkiah, we mentioned he has another opinion later on. This is the later on by cheese. He says the reason why it's asur for having cheese of a goy, because they coat the surface of the cheese with pig fat. Because they curdle it with vinegar wine vinegar, which is nesach. And the next reason, because they use the sap of an orla tree. An orla tree is a tree that you can't use for 3 or 4 years. And the sap is also asur. So that since they use the sap, it's asur for benefit. The Gemara says, come on, who's according to? Like the following Tana. Mishnah says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Hama'ameh b'sraf ha'orla asur. Someone curdles milk with the orla sap, that cheese is asur. Because the sap is considered fruit of the tree, and the fruit of the tree is asur for benefit. The Gemara says, I feel timat Yeshua. No, even Rabbi Yeshua would agree over here that's asur. Ad kan lo pligi Rabbi Yeshua, let Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua only disagrees with Rabbi Eliezer. Ela b'kitva the gavza regarding the wood resin. That Rabbi Eliezer says it's asur. Rabbi Yeshua says mutar because it's not the tree, part of the tree, not fruit of a tree. Regarding to the sap of the fruit, it's also asur. That's what Mishnah says. Marbi Yeshua, Shemach v'Vrish Shemach Yisrach ha'alin, u'b'Yisrach ha'ikarin mutar. He said, I heard it specifically that if one curdles milk with the sap of the leaves of the orla tree or the sap of the roots, the cheese is mutar. But sap of pagina asur, but if it's sap of the fruits or the unripe figs, that's asur. That's the fruit. Okay. Now, Ben Rav Hizda, Ben Rav Nachman, by Yitzhak, according to both opinions, that says that cheese made with goyim's vinegar is asur, and also that the orla sap stuff is asur. Titzap ana'ah, if that's the case, then it should be asur b'hana'ah. Orla is asur b'hana'ah. Uh, wine vinegar of a goy is also asur b'hana'ah. So why doesn't the cheese should be asur b'hana'ah? How can you sell it? According to Chachamim, the Gemara says, kasha, it's a good question. Darash Nachman Bered Hizda. In our Mishnah, we mentioned the pasuk. My Dirti, what is the pasuk explanation? L're'yach shemanecha tovim. Your oils smell good. Refers to Tamir Chacham. Lema Tamir Chacham, what is the Tamir Chacham compared to? It's a Hichel Palatin, to a jar of a beautiful fragrance oil. Mechula Reha Nadef. If it's open, the smell spreads out. Mechusa in but if it's covered, it smells like a So too, when Tamir Hacham opens up his jar and spreads learning, that's when he will spread people will know who he is. Not only that, but things that were previously hidden from him, he'll figure out now. Which means alamot means which usually means woman means uh uh they will love you. What kere alamot refer you can also read it as hidden things. Blood not only that ela shmalach mavito and not only that but the angel of death will love him. Shemar alamot avucha kere alamav you could play with the words. He'll give him extra life. Below down that, he also inherits two worlds. This world and next world to be successful in both worlds. You can also read it as olamot, which is worlds. Okay. The following things from the Goyim are not allowed to be consumed. But there's no isur against benefiting from it, meaning you're able to sell it. Milk that is milked by a goy without the Jew seeing it. This is isur doraita. People forget because we are so spoiled in America. If you go out of America where there's no hashgacha and there's no OU and there's no governmental authority that the people are scared to sketch it. That's why we're allowed to have chalav stam over here, according to Moshe Feinstein. You cannot have milk that is just regular milk. You cannot assume it's cow milk. You have to assume that it's not kosher, unless it's from a kosher bottle that you witness. So, regardless, halab stam, milk by a goy is asur, bahapat, and the bread of a goy also asur. V'hashem and also their oil. We'll explain soon that maybe it's not the case. Rabbi Yubet Dino Hitrim Beshamin and Rabbi Yudanasi and his court allowed oil of a goy. Vashlakot cooked foods of a goy also asur, right? Bishul akum. Ukvashin shudakanaten l'dochan yain v'homed. Also items that they used to preserve via wine and vinegar are asur because the wine. V'tarit terufa and also cut up tarit. Tarit is a very tiny fish that it's when they used to chop it up into pieces. Never you couldn't tell what it was anymore. So since you can't tell what it is, you can't eat it from a goy. Nowadays, the Hainu Ashkenazim have a gefilte fish. I guess if a goy makes it, you can't tell what on earth that's from. I don't even know what it's from right now. So if that's the case, then since you can't tell what it is, it's also to eat from a goy because you don't know if it's a kosher fish. Next case is interesting. The sea she'en b'dadav kilbit shot and brine. If it does not have a kilbit fish swimming in it, it's asur. What is a kilbit fish? A kilbit fish would only be able to swim in a kosher fish brine, otherwise it won't survive. So if there's a kilbit fish inside this fish brine, it's kosher fish brine. If it's not kosher fish brine, this kilbit fish cannot survive. The kilbit fish itself is not in kosher. The hilak, also the hilak we mentioned before, that it's a sultanate fish, very tiny fish that when it's younger does not have fish and scales, and she grows them as she gets older. The koresh shahiti, also a grain of haltit. Haltit is a very, very sharp plant, flavored plant that has it is very sharp, and therefore, if it's cut with a knife of a goy, this is where the concept of sharp foods come from, like an onion. If it's cut by the knife of a goy, then he uses it for non-kosher stuff, or vice versa, it'll transfer. Next, umelach shalkulinit, also sakulinit salt. We'll explain why. How do you listen? All these are asur. Then students halal, but they're not isur for benefit. Ron said, halal l'man yahushta. Why worry about milk? Even mishum arab, if they're worried that they're going to switch it for pit non-kosher milk. Taori heve, but that's easy. Kosher milk is usually white. Tamei yarok, and the non-kosher milk is usually yellowish tinge. Ron said, even mishum eruv, and if you're worried about them mixing it, nekum, curdle it. Try to make cheese. Now more like Hamim say, halal tahor omed, halal tamei omed. Kosher milk is easy to make cheese. Non-kosher milk is not easy to make cheese. So test it. Why is it asur? Because the Jew wants it for cheese. Hachanami, then yes, he could test it. Hachabay scheme, but we're talking about a case over here, the kabaile melkamba, where he wants us to use it for his food. He wants to use it as like a dip. Therefore, you can't test it. Gemara says, "V'nishchol mine kalei ve'nikum." Okay, take a little sample, curdle a piece, then have the rest. Test it. Gemara says, "Kevin de betahor nami ikan nisyovet lom kame." Since in kosher milk, there is sometimes a little part of it that the whey that won't curdle. It's impossible to know for sure whether or not it's milk or whey. Test will fail. Even if an answer, I feel even want to take a case where it's a sore, even if the guy wants more cheese. Why? Because the curdle test might fail. It could fit because maybe the way WHEY that won't curdle is inside the holes, and the rest of it will curdle, and therefore you'll be fooled. Okay. Pat, the bread of a goy, that's what. Marav Kana, Marav Yohanan. Pat, lohutra betin, bread is not allowed by Beti. Gemara says, Michal de ikam an deshari. Okay. Bread was not re-allowed by Betin of Rudan and Seed, like we said in Mishnah. Only oil. So why are you saying that? Sounds like someone else allowed it. The Gemara says, in yes, this is that one time I saw Rabbi and say go to the field. The goy brought him a bread baked in a beautiful oven. Me'afak se'an, it was the size of a se'ah, which is massive. 12,000 egg size. Rabbi said, come on, look how beautiful this bread is. Why did Hachamim have to make this asur? Wait 1 second. Maru Hamim, Mishum Hatanut. We know why they made it asur, because we don't want a risk of intermarriage. That's why Hachamim made it asur. He knew that. The Gemara says no. And the Maru Hamim, lo hasrat basadir. He said, no, I understand the bread not eating with them in their houses or in the city. But right now we're in the field. There's no case of intermarriage and mingling. It should be mutar in the field. The Gemara says, people thought that this is the way that Rabbi Danasi is saying that the bread of a goy is allowed. But look, it's not the case. Rabbi did not allow it. He was just wondering out loud. Different version of how when things went down. That's not the story. Ella Hamruba, they said, one time Rabbi went to a certain place, and he saw bread, there was no bread for his tamdim. Amar, he said, Amar Rabbi, En kan pater, there's no bakery here. Now, people thought, he means that you could get from a non-kosher baker, non-Jewish baker. The Gemara says, no, but he meant a Jewish baker. Okay. Even according to many hold that he meant it regarding a non-Jewish baker. That only applies if there's no Jewish baker around to make the bread. But according to in the place where there is a baker who's a Jew, you're not allowed. That's why the people are very much nowadays on Pat Yisrael. For this reason, because now it's readily available by Jews. Yochanan says, I feel the one that, and if you think the going to make better bread, I ask you to pick up a challah from my wife every Friday. If I don't, let me know. You'll see whose is better. Rabbi Yochanan says, I feel the one according to the opinion holds that the bread of a baker is asur. Hanamil Basadet only applies to is mutar rather only in the field because there's no mixage. Avaba'ir in the city, no heter because we're into marriage. Now I go one time. Rabbi was telling he was eating bread outside the border in the fields. Where it says, he said to his students, don't mention Aibus halachot anymore in the Bet Midrash because eating non-Jewish bread. Very powerful. Right, so he's putting something in his mouth that's inappropriate, therefore you don't take out the appropriate words out of his mouth. When we mention the oil. Shemen, the reason why oil, Rab says that because Daniel and Navi made a gezerah. Stop intermarriage. Shmuel says, we're worried that they're tamei, vessels that they made it in made the oil asur. One second. Only Kohanim with Tiruma and Maaser, those type of things have to be Tahor, but otherwise we're not Machmir on Tuma. Not everybody's always Tahor. The one says, Ella's liftatan shel kelim asunos and what about the flavors from the utensils made the oil asor? The one says, Amal de Shmuel Rav, based on what it makes sense according to my opinion regarding the taste. Ta'amin is liftan shel kelim asurin. I said because of the flavors. I know the Chiat Rav Yitzhak Dari Shmuel B'Matav of Mar. That makes sense because the story of Rav Yitzhak came to Eretz Yisrael and he said that Ish Rabbi Simai ben Sivin. He said that Rabbi Simai made an announcement in his shiur in the Sivin that Shemin regarding oil of a goy. Rabbi Dava bet dinom nimnu alav ve'tiruhu. He said that Rabbi Danasi and his court re-allowed it. That makes sense because because Rabbi Danasi holds that if the flavor makes the item, even if it's a flavor being given to the item, but if the flavor makes the item taste worse, it's mutar versus an improvement. According to you, Da'amar Daniel Gazarla, but according to you, it says that Daniel Navi made it asur. Daniel Gazar Ba'atar Bitan Nasib Matilla. Can it be such a thing that Daniel Navi can make a decree and Rabbi Nasi brings his court? Impossible. Batna Mishnah says Mesechah Betzah. In Batin Yachol Batel Divrei Batin Achero Avro. One court cannot abolish the din, the decree of another court. Elam Kin Gadol Hamenu B'Chachma B'Nyan, unless you're greater in wisdom and in number. Now, Rabbi Nasi is not bigger than the Navi. The Gemara says, no, I could defend myself. Simlai Luda'a Kamar, are you quoting Simlai, that the guy from Lod? Shan Luda'a, the people from Lod are different because they make mistakes in Torah. Now, Amalei Shmuel says, okay, Eshlachne, should I tell Rabbi Simlai what you just said? Except Rav got embarrassed. Amar Rav, he said, Him lo darshu. If they did not mention this in Rabbi Nasi's court, I don't know that we shouldn't explain it ourselves, meaning, if they don't understand the Pasuk, let's explain it ourselves. Vakti Pasuk says, "Vayasim Daniel libo asher lo yidga ad befad barach hamelech ubiyayin mishtav." Daniel said in his heart, yani he made a decision that he won't eat the king's bread or the wine or the drinks. Now the Gemara says, "B'shtei mishtot." It mentions two different drinks: "Echad mishteh yain ve'echad mishteh shemen," wine drinks and oil drinks. So seemingly Daniel said that you can't have oil. The Gemara says, "Rav savar ali bosam." Rav understands that pasuk that only in his heart he did it on himself. Uchol Yisrael hora, sorry, and he also did it for Bnei Israel. Ushmuel, Mashmuel Savar says no. Ali Bosan, he only did it for himself. Uchol Yisrael lo hora, but not for Bnei Israel. Vishem Daniel Gazar. One second, but did Daniel really make a decree against oil? Bamar Baldi Amar Avimi Nituna Abishmid Rav. We're asking a question against Rav. Through Rav. Pitan Vishamnan Yanan Uvnotehen. Decrees against bread, oil, wine, and their non-Jewish daughters. We'll explain what that means. Kulan mishemona asar davarhen. This is a special time when the students of Bet Shammai outnumbered the students of Bet Hillel, and they made 18 decrees. This is when the decree happened, not from Navi. This happened during Tanaim, way after Daniel. How can Rab say that? The Gemara says no. Maybe Daniel decreed it, but Bnei Yisrael didn't accept it. And therefore, the students of Bet Hillel and Shammai had to decree it. If that's the case, then why would Rab say that it would put Daniel? The Gemara says, okay, fine, you know what? Really, Daniel maybe only decreed it against the city. But it was then the Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai students came and decreed it also in the fields. We'll stop here. Rahman and Amen.